Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I face a very difficult proposition because my personality has already been built, and that is something I'm not. I aspire to reach the feet of God at some point in time, but to brand me as de facto number one is not in. Be that as it may, I'd like to first admit that I am not worthy of being the chief guest today. For several reasons, because if you were to look at the resumes that we read out of the people on the dais, and I'm sure of the dais because I've interacted with many, I fail miserably in terms of my involvement quotient as far as not-for-profits is concerned. So from that perspective, I must admit that I'm nowhere there. But thanks to Dr. Parle and Dr. Narayan, they found me fit enough to grace this occasion, so here I am. Being the last speaker is also a dangerous proposition, because everything is already said. What do I talk about? So I said, let me take a small deviation and give you a story which is mixed with, a few bit here and there. I want to have these children involved. Students, please raise your hands. You still around? Yeah. Yes. Let me ask you a very simple question. Sells more in India, tomato ketchup or soya sauce? Tomato ketchup? The answer is soya sauce. Okay? The answer is soya sauce, and I got to know about it only yesterday. I was at a retail summit yesterday, and we were mapping the kind of demographic and psychological changes that is affecting the Indian consumer. So from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, a lot of people have started using Chinese food as one of their key meals in the day. There are, I believe, about 240 Chinese outlets in Nasik alone. And the MD of Ching's Secret mentioned that soya sauce is now the single most largest selling sauce to ketchup in India. Why do I say this? I say this for two reasons. Number one, India is not a country, it's a continent. Every 100 miles you go, the language changes, the culture changes, the barriers of influence change. And when these things happen, it becomes a lot more difficult for a Dr. Narayan and for a Dr. Pillai to get their tasks across. Today you are present all across the country, which is admirable because it's as good as being present across several continents. A Jaipur market is not the same as a market in maybe Trichy perhaps. So there's a vast difference. Another noting that I perhaps missed out was, Dr. Pillai mentioned that you eradicated leprosy from the country. And all of us in the audience just took it as another piece of information. I think this is a huge milestone as far as India is concerned. It deserves a big round of applause. Okay, I'm going to involve the kids a little more. India, as you perhaps know, is not all rich. It's a combination of the rich and the poor. And the poor are classified as the bottom of the pyramid. You know how much the poor earn on an average in India in terms of daily wages? Less than $2 a day. That's what we would perhaps spend on an ice cream at Baskin Robbins. That's how much the poor in India earn in a day. And mind you, the poor has to substantiate on a family of 4 or more. And 60 to 70% of India is still poor. So if you were to look at the divide between the rich and the poor, as Dr. Narayan mentioned, India is still a developing economy, because until and unless every single mouth in India gets to eat a normal full square meal, I don't think we've eradicated poverty in any small measure. So when you speak in terms of the bottom of the pyramid, there are several interventions which can be planned. And I'm only going to restrict myself to the kind of interventions which IDF is into. And aptly so, because they are the key drivers to getting the BOP up in the value chain. So if you were to look at it, education, healthcare and rural development are a three-pronged strategy that Dr. Parle has adopted, in his Vision 2020. Now, when you look at education once again, he's mentioned 5,000 students and about 50 Gurukuls as of now. But I'm told that their promise to reach 100 by March 2012 is already in place, which means in the next 6 months, I'd like to understand that you're going to add another 50 Gurukuls. I think that deserves another round of applause. Now, why I say this has a very different connotation. Here is a man, here's an organization which is trying to reach out to the bottom of the pyramid in some kind of social inclusion. Inclusion is a key and the buzzword out here. Unless you include the bottom of the pyramid in terms of the India growth story, the story will remain a story and will soon transform itself into a nightmare. Because you cannot have an India which is rich and you cannot have an India which is poor. You should have an India which believes in distributive justice, and that can only happen through such cycles of immersion. So what you're doing in the education space is perhaps one step towards that direction. Now another area is health. Leprosy is eradicated, but I was kind of amazed to know that there are 14 million TB patients in India. And the numbers for HIV and AIDS is perhaps much, much larger than that. And to add to that, you have cancer. You have more than 30 million blind in India today. Blind not because they are blind by birth, blind because of the natural cause, and there is a cure for it. Unfortunately, we are perhaps not doing enough. And therefore, the numbers keep on increasing. Now, IDF again comes into play out here through a three-dimensional approach. What you are perhaps seeing is the financial side of the approach. I am speaking in terms of the societal involvement and the spiritual approach that IDF is also into. Now, a single organization is trying to intervene across several measures of ailments. That itself is, plausible. But what they are also trying to do is, they are trying to build an ecosystem around themselves which helps de-stress the entire ecosystem in terms of the vagaries of such ailments. I think from that perspective, a lot to learn. This is where I would say that, your low-priced social immersion in terms of providing low-priced social and healthcare objective is, I think, well worth emulating. The third is in terms of rural development. Now, in yesterday's seminar, they spoke about education and learning and development as two different criteria. They said that what you learn in school is education, what you learn in college and beyond is purely in terms of skilling or vocational guidance. Now, vocational guidance is what a majority of India requires. Vocational guidance is what IDF is looking to provide. I don't know how many of you are aware of, but I was going through their website and it spoke about vocational guidance and skilling in terms of tailoring. They've created a huge bank of people who've been employed, self-employed, through tailoring practices. Now that's again a huge measure in that particular direction. There are other interventions also which IDF is making, but it is very important for us to understand here that vocational guidance is the way India will move. In a deliberation at the RISE Summit yesterday, which is the Retail Association of India, the biggest problem they are facing is a labor crunch situation. And they said that the labor crunch situation can come in not from graduates and postgraduates, but will come in from people who are just school pass out with some enablement in terms of immersion through vocational and skilling. And this is where I think IDF is also creating a lot of positive efforts. Now, a little bit about the institute that I represent. We are very small in the not-for-profit ecosystem. We have about 420 students who are mandated to undergo 1 month of NGO stroke social enterprise stroke corporate social responsibility interface every year. It is mandated and it is part of the curriculum. Why do we do it? It is essentially to sensitize the students to the bottom of the pyramid. Because mind you, any person who sends his or her child to an MBA program in this country has to spend upwards of 6 lakhs. So obviously they do not belong to the bottom of the pyramid. And therefore it becomes important for us to sensitize these students to the other end of the spectrum. And this is where I think IDF has given us a lot of support, thanks to Dr. Parle and Dr. Narayan. Year on year we have had about 20 students who come in here, train, who come back on campus, make presentations, and suddenly you see some sensitization which is happening. And that's something which I'd like to thank IDF for. In closing, I'd like to mention 2 things. I was recently traveling to New Zealand and I saw a notice outside a barber's shop that said, "We need your heads for our business." Now, in the India growth story, if we need to eradicate illiteracy, if we need to eradicate poverty, if we need to bring in social inclusion, there is one person we need, and there are millions of others we need. I think we need many more Dr. Pillais in the making. So very soon you change the name of your organization from the Indian Leprosy Foundation to the Indian Development Foundation. I would want you in the next 5 years to think of another name change, which according to me would read as Indian Sustainable Foundation, because what you've already done is you've developed enough and more. Sustenance is the key perhaps in the next couple of years. Ladies and gentlemen and little children all over, it requires a great deal of effort from each one of us to reach deep down into our pockets and sacrifice that one single ice cream and make that donation to the underprivileged of the society. Each one of us does it in our own sweet way, but I think we need to involve ourselves in a larger scale so that we as a country, grow and become on par and also surpass some of the developed economies in the world. Jai Hind, and thanks a lot.